Yes, €1 buys you a home in Sicily, but I'm going to show you how you can do much, much better than one of these €1 homes. And that's by traveling to one of these three pristine, stunning towns in Sicily, spending a bit more, spending 30 to 40,000 euros. And instead of spending €1 on a renovation project, spend 30 to 40,000 euros on something that's move-in ready. Lovely to see you, Ciaran.
Lovely to see you, Ronan. I'm very excited about today. We're going to talk about one of my favorite places in the world, one of my favorite places to go, favorite places to scout. That's Sicily. Absolutely incredible island.
Absolutely. And I guess the thing about Sicily, Ciaran, and I think this is one of the things that has captivated both of us about it, is just the variety. The to see Mount Etna, just rising up, snow clad for part of the year, clad with beautiful spring flowers in springtime, charming beach towns, stunning beaches, wine country, Roman ruins. It's really got just about everything.
Yeah, just about everything, the history, the culture, ruins that date back to Greek times even. And what's so beautiful about Sicily is like when you're out in this countryside and when you're exploring, you really feel like, to me, like you're in this lost in time landscape. You drive over these hills and you can imagine like Roman legionnaires crossing the plains here. It's like, it's one of those places that just takes you to an entirely different world. And you can see why that has such appeal, why people have been coming to Sicily, why people have been buying real estate there, because as a place to escape, as a place to have a home where you spend like 3-4 months a year, or really, really escape to somewhere totally different, I can think of few better places in the world. And that's especially true when you consider how incredibly low real estate prices are in Sicily, like mind-bogglingly low.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ciaran, what a place to eat. What a place to
Oh,
just slow down to eat. And knowing that you're going to hike up an ancient hill town or hike up a mountain in the afternoon and it'll all be burnt off.
all be burnt off. And that's kind of the thing that I most appeals to me about the lifestyle in Sicily. Like, you know, I love the hill towns. I'm actually not a big fan of Palermo. If you've been to the Sicilian capital, not my kind of place. It's very reminiscent of Napoli or Naples if you've been there. It's a little bit run down in places. But what I love is I love the faded grandeur. And that's what you really get when you go out into the hill towns, and you're walking in these places and they just feel ancient and they have this kind of faded beauty, faded elegance, and it's such a beautiful place to be and spend time. You feel immersed in the history and the culture of the country. And when you're in these hill towns, what I love about is the simplicity of life. I love arriving in a restaurant and they have one thing on the menu or two things on the menu. Here's the thing we're doing today. Do you want it or not? And the thing of it is, when you find yourself in a town that size and when you're eating in that kind of restaurant, it's always good. It's never bad.
Absolutely. Are arriving to the restaurant at like 1:30, and the entire staff and family are having their lunch, and I'm saying, can I have my lunch? And they're, no, 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 come back at 3. We're eating now. Palermo, Ciaran, I'm with you on that. For me, that has takes a lot of its architectural influences, I would think, from North Korea. So it's got a bit of that North Korea vibe in terms of the suburbs and the edges of the city. But that grandeur, that faded grandeur, and just the quirkiness of it, just the apparent chaotic buildings, laundry flying everywhere, and then these like men and women come out in just perfect, you know, perfectly dressed and pressed and ready for posing and ready for the pomp and the ceremony of an Italian evening on a moped. Um, but I guess, Ciaran, the first kind of question, or the first, why is Sicily so cheap? It's the first question that people will very obviously ask. And I mean, it's just basic supply and demand. I mean, the south of Italy, and in particular Sicily, over the past 5 or 8 decades just has had a dearth of economic opportunity. Pretty much 1/3 of all homes in Sicily are either unoccupied or occupied part-time by a non-resident. So, when people up and leave for opportunity, it just leaves empty real estate. And the second thing that's happened in parallel is, the young people with kids, with families, many of those want to live outside the old towns. The real estate that we want, they don't want it because it's tricky to get the kids in and out to school. It's tricky to get groceries up and down. Parking is an issue. So, both demographics and changing behaviors have just kind of created this opportunity for us to buy incredible real estate and an amazing lifestyle that comes with it for an absolute song.
An absolute song. And you have to give, Sicily credit, because obviously they had this problem for decades of depopulation. They had these problems where their towns were being hollowed out and these empty homes were being left abandoned. And, to help solve this problem, they came up with arguably, I think, one of the smartest, most effective real estate marketing strategies of the last several decades, this €1 homes idea. And they're thinking, looking at all these abandoned homes, these collapsing homes, thinking, what can we do? I believe you were there at the very birth of this movement, Ronan, the €1 home scheme, but like an absolute genius piece of marketing to get global attention onto their real estate scene and how affordable it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, our friend and IL founding publisher, Bill Bonner, he had been on to me, all the time. He kept saying, you got to go check out this €1 home scheme. And I was naturally very, very skeptical. I presumed it was going to be in towns. It was going to be terrible real estate. It was going to come with all forms of obligations and liabilities, and that the towns were going to be completely abandoned. But I jumped on a plane. I landed in Rome. I took the train from Rome all the way down across the Straits of Messina. It was part of a big, broader scouting trip. Rented a car and just headed straight for a town called Gangi, which was at that time was one of the leaders in this movement. And I drove along a coast road and then just up a winding road, just with these just incredible views, incredible sea views, just as we got higher and higher. And then when we oriented in the other direction, just see these big plains opening up. It was really, really dramatic. And then we got up into the pine forests. And I arrived at Gangi, parked my car, followed the instructions. I was staying in a short-term rental, got to my base, which was just a absolutely beautifully renovated townhome, and then stuck my head out the window, Ciaran. And this was probably at about 5 or 6 in the afternoon, and crickets. There was literally no. And I was just there looking around. Everything was closed. There was no one on the streets, total crickets. And then I was in this beautifully renovated townhome. It was just absolutely fabulous. And I know the owner had been from the town and had relocated to Milan, and she was in fashion or design or something. And I was thinking to myself, this place is gorgeous, but what the hell am I doing here? So I closed everything and I went for a bit of a nap. And, a couple of hours later, I opened the shutters again. And oh my God, it was like a James Bond movie, because there was some kind of religious festival, or it was the saint of the area going on. And the streets were thronged, not just busy, but it was just this movement of people following a procession that ended up in the main square, and just this huge party. It was just an absolutely fabulous evening. And, then of course, later after the siesta, all the shops opened up, the restaurants opened up, and this place was fabulous. and vibrant and, is full of old people as you'd expect, but also full of young families.
Yeah, incredible. And I mean, so I mean, you were there at the very beginning of it. Are €1 homes a scam, Ronan? Can we talk about that? Can we address the big kind of question people might have? So if you're looking in a place like Gangi, is it a scam to get a €1
Well,
home?
yeah, so that then over the next couple of days, so I spent the next 3 days looking at real estate there, and I spent the first day with the mayor and a kind of a group of local dignitaries going around looking at the €1 homes. And Ciaran, I was saying like, wow, this stuff stacks up. This really stacks up. We were looking at homes that they were fine, I mean,
Mm.
needed a bit of TLC, some of them needed a bit of work on the roof, maybe plumbing, maybe electrics. They weren't fancy, but it was legit. Like, I mean, these were actual places that were close to habitable. They were very close to habitable, and everything seemed to work. The municipality were great. Just the whole town was behind this program. But then, Ciaran, in the following couple of days, I went around with real estate brokers and I started looking at other properties. And there I found two different levels of properties that I thought both were a better deal. One was for kind of 30 or 40 grand. You could get a very, very nice and totally move in ready, home, the type of homes that you've seen in recent years, built over 3 levels, from the top level and some of the windows, you've awesome views. Of course, you're in the historic old town. Everything is a stroll, and, a better deal. So straight away, I saw €1 homes, fine, stacks up, legit, no complaints, expectations exceeded. But for 30 grand, I get something better. Then I went up to the next level again, which was on the fancy street, the street where the merchants and the priests and the judge and all the fancy people lived. And there you got much higher ceilings, you just got grander homes. And back then, 100 grand would buy you a move-in ready home in the grander street. And the grander street really translates to more windows, higher ceilings, and just a more spacious, opulent aspect. But so that was my first experience, my first lesson. Um, they're legit, it stacks up. I was just really, really impressed with everything associated with Gangi's €1 home scheme. But pay a little bit more and you get a lot more real estate for your euros.
I mean, that kind of very closely mirrors like my experiences when I was scouting in Sicily, kind of similar properties. So you asked me to kind of go and take a look at some other towns in Sicily, which I did a bit over a year ago or so now. But I drove off to visit a place called Mussomeli. And Mussomeli is one of those kind of towns that was very like Gangi, kind of followed in Gangi's wake, took from it like what the lessons and became a very, very big nexus for €1 homes towns. But by the time I'd arrived in the town, like the €1 homes thing was kind of not what people were talking about anymore. People weren't really buying those homes. They kind of figured out what you had said there, Ronan, that like €1 homes, yes, they're legit. You get 4 walls and they might need extensive renovation, but they're not a scam. You get a house for that. But pay 25, 35 grand. And you're getting such a better deal because you're getting something that, might need some renovation and might need plastering and things like that. But a lot of those homes are move-in ready. Like, Frank, you had told me that, and I was still shocked when I saw it personally. Because I landed in this town and I met the agency that kind of runs what they call the premium homes. That's what the homes that are 25 to 35 grand, they're the premium ones, And you're thinking, okay, a premium home is 25 grand though. How premium can it be? And I met these two wonderful women in Mussomeli, Antonella and like a girl whose name Natalie, and they were just absolutely, they couldn't have been nicer. And I bundled into their car, this SUV, and we went spinning around the old town of Mussomeli down these cobbled roads, and completely lost almost immediately. And they're like, we arrived at the first home. They're like, okay, now this home it's one of the top premium ones. It's 35 grand. And I'm thinking, okay, 35 grand. How nice can it be? And I walked in, I was like, it's lovely. It had marble floors. It had 4 stairs. It had, 4 floors. It had views out to the hills. And I was like, you need plaster it and paint it, but you could have moved into it in weeks. You know what I mean? And I was like, 35 grand. Mind blown. Like mind blown.
Ciaran, I remember being in Cabo when you were sharing those videos in our WhatsApp group and you were talking about the premium listings. And again, it's just so kind of bizarre because in Cabo, which is in Mexico, a 500 grand condo is considered, like, the real estate community call that the lower end of the market. And that's in Mexico and Latin America. And here you are in Europe, in a destination or a country, at least Italy, which many people will perceive to being premium. And for like 1/20th of that price, it's called premium. A couple of things, Ciaran, that we should drill on is the choice of the towns you went
Um,
to. Why I
yeah.
think that's really, really important because, again, sometimes in scouting, you just get lucky
Yeah.
first time out. And by getting lucky, we kind of understand the formula and look to replicate it. And with Gangi, that was definitely the case because with Gangi, I could see the formula, what you need for this type of real estate to work. You need like a functioning real community, ideally proximity to an international airport, and also ideally with proximity to beach, because ultimately that full package becomes very compelling. But before we dive into that, I'm also getting flashbacks to my time in Gangi and driving around those pedestrian streets with this guy who I'd say I spent half a day with him. He smoked at least 50 cigarettes and he was like, and you're in a kind of a clown car. You're just flying down steps and everything. And I remember my first night to when I arrived and just as I was walking to my home, and one of these cars came zipping. And I didn't know what to do. And I kind of jumped into a doorway or something. And then the car stopped and the guy got out and he just started screaming at me. And I'm like, what have I done? Couldn't understand a word. And then he started gesturing and he was doing this gesture like this. And then he showed me what you do when a car comes barreling towards you, which is put your back to the building, put your hands up and just go that. And that's the protocol. You don't waste time, risk anything by running for a doorway. That's what you do. And again, it was just kind and generous and fun and quirky that he took the time out to share that with me.
This is what I found as well when you're in Sicily, and especially when you're in the hill towns, not just in Sicily, but Italy. Italy is as advertised. It is as
Yeah,
wild and communal and wonderful. People are welcoming, but also everything is a bit mad. Like Italy is as advertised. And if you kind of a lust for life, if you have a lust for life, this is just places to be because like they're lovely, kind of integrated communal places, but also they're not like boring. These small
yeah,
towns, there's this
yeah.
they're kind of a bit wild and interesting and
Yeah.
brilliant, and that's kind of why I love them. I love spending time in
Yeah,
them.
yeah. And like, I mean, that morning I arrived down to the town hall to meet the mayor and to go looking at these properties. And it was all very ceremonial. And this guy was like giving the kind of big shot vibe and just this kind of aura of moving things around and kind of a bit appeared quite arrogant. And there was a translator, and I thought, Jesus, gonna have to gonna have to make small talk via translator with this guy now for hours is what's going through my head. And then this guy who looked like he might have had a learning disability or there was something going on kind of came up to him and he whispered there was something going on and he sent him away. And then he came over to me and he said, "Oh, don't mind that. That's a stupido. That's just a stupido." Calling the person a stupido. And I'm thinking, geez, man, where I'm from, you, you you can't and probably shouldn't say things like that anymore. So we went on our tour, and next thing I could see, um, this guy with the learning disability was being sent off by the entourage on all these errands. And it was like, go over here, here's a really, really important document. You need to get it to the notary straight away. This whole thing was going on. And after by lunchtime, the penny dropped. The penny dropped with some further explanations. Um, the guy had learning disabilities and was orphaned, and he was adopted by the community, and the town hall became his home, and the whole thing was caring for him. The whole thing was a whole set of tasks to give his life value and use. So again, it was just one of these total flipping situations where something that appeared to be very, inappropriate and cold was actually completely the opposite.
Yeah, it's communal. Like, these wonderful towns, like they are so communal. Like, and like that's kind of what you're looking for. And like when if anyone is interested in this opportunity, and wants to kind of own in Sicily, like what we did when we were looking and trying to zero in these towns, we started by looking at the 1 euro homes towns, because the ones that had been successful at it have brought in foreign investment, and they had that community. So they had the local community, and now increasingly they have expat communities. So when we were scouting, we were looking at the 1 euro homes towns, not because we thought 1 euro homes were a good deal, but because the ones that had succeeded in those policies had kind of were the ones where were being revitalized. And that's where you kind of want to look. And that's what led us to Mussomeli. And that's what I found when I was on the ground there. Like, the local community was getting new investment. There was real life there. But then it was also like, I met expats there from the US, from the UK, from the Caribbean even. And like, I did a real estate tour with a guy, an Australian guy who had lived in the Philippines, and now he wanted to retire. And we went around and we looked at some houses together in Mussomeli, and he ended up buying there afterwards. One really interesting point, and this is kind of a small aside, but one really interesting point about like what I learned from kind of visiting towns that had been successful in the 1 euro homes thing and towns that hadn't, is that the importance of basic administration, like, you know what I mean? And not every place gets that right. Why was Mussomeli successful? You gave some factors there that were important, like access to the beach. Mussomeli is about an hour from the southern beaches. It's up there in the center of Sicily. You have decent access to Palermo. But there's other towns that have more natural advantages, I would say. Why was Mussomeli successful? They had an English language website and an English language phone line, and they made it easy. It's as simple as that. And so many towns didn't do that. Like, when in our research, in our scouting, I emailed so many towns asking them, can I come and take a look at your homes? And very often you're emailing like local government officials, because the mayor set up this 1 euro home scheme because it's popular and successful in other towns. And you email a local government official and he might not care, he might not speak English, you know what I mean? It could take weeks to get back to you. Mussomeli turned it over to the two ladies I met who work for a private agency. They launched an English language website. You can text them on WhatsApp, and they made it easy, and the third town is being transformed as a result. And like, it shows like what some simple things can do to transform communities and really bring back a communal atmosphere. So very, very interesting to me as a takeaway from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, this is so like, many other places on our beat, inexpensive homes in Sicily. That's a big idea that stacks up. But really, to really be successful, you have to drill, and you have to find the right town, the right street in that town, and then also the right people to work with on the ground to make it a success. It wasn't just Mussomeli that you found that certainly had all of us internally eye-watering and in awe at some of the homes and the values you found. But Gratteri was another one.
Yeah, that one, maybe that's my favorite find in Sicily, my favorite find. So, and that was interesting because that didn't have a 1 euro home scheme. Basically, they had kind of like, they'd been very active in as a town in getting listings onto the market and working with agencies and getting, like, a lot of towns might just, they kind of really worked at like, okay, let's these empty homes, these abandoned homes. Let's get them out there. Let's get them promoted so that people will find them. And Gratteri is like, it's a very small, like Mussomeli is a big place. Like it suffered depopulation, but there's still 10,000 people there. It's a decent sized town. Gratteri is like, it's outside. It's near Cefalù, which people may know. Cefalù is a big historic attraction, big seaside kind of historic town in Sicily that gets a lot of tourists every year. It has like, UNESCO World Heritage sites in the town. It has beautiful beaches. And Gratteri is just 30 minutes away up the coast. It's a small village, 1,000 people maybe. But what you get there was that incredible combination of access to like a properly beautiful historic tourist town with beaches, Cefalù. You're up in the mountains. You have views of the coast of the Mediterranean. You have easy access to Palermo. There's skiing nearby, And I was thinking, when I arrived in this town, I was thinking I'd come from Mussomeli and a few other towns in central Sicily that I'd scouted. And I was thinking, well, I'll get here now. And, homes will probably be quite a bit more expensive and they were a little bit more expensive, but even ocean view homes, Mediterranean view homes up in this town, 35,000 euros starting, and again, you need to do a bit of work. You might want to modernize the bathrooms, etc., plaster, but livable, solid structures. One of the homes I saw, 35,000 euros, new windows, in the home for 35,000 euros. And you're thinking, incredible. Incredible value.
And it just kind of very, very randomly, so we had a cousin's barbecue, my parents and their generation and cousins, and one of the families of my age are just back from their summer holidays in Cefalù, and they were just captivated by the place, just thought it was absolutely fabulous, just amazing food, amazing place to vacation, so fabulous that it wasn't overrun with English speakers. They really embraced the exercise of learning a bit of Italian and communicating that way, and absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I was blown away by it. I stayed in Cefalù when I was scouting the region, and like it wasn't a super busy season when I was there. It was April, May-ish maybe. I absolutely adored it. Absolutely adored it. Now I hear from the locals, like in peak tourist season, it's a busy destination, but when I was there, absolutely incredible. Couldn't recommend it enough. There's a arancini place in town that's like has the best I've ever had in my life, and I do love arancini. But yeah, that's why I was so attracted to that town, Gratteri, because it does put you like you have access to Cefalù and everything that it offers, and then you're in this wonderful, quiet community, where you have like 2 restaurants and 1 cafe, and you need to stay on very good terms with your local barista because there's nowhere else to go. If you annoy him, you're cut off for a while. But yeah, just so attractive. And like that town as well, we talk about like the importance of choosing a community where you have revitalization, where you have some investment coming in. That's the key to tapping into this opportunity. That's something that is happening in Gratteri too. Like the agent I met there who gave me a tour of the town, said he'd sold 50 or so homes there. He was pointing out homes. That home belongs to a London stockbroker. That home belongs to a Stanford professor. People there were like investing different levels of money. Some people were doing a basic renovation, but some had done really, really like high-end kind of renovations of their homes, had put in a couple 100,000 and done interesting things with the properties. Like one thing you'll see in these properties, the really older ones in Sicily, is sometimes they have a well on the you walk in the ground floor and it's a well, and it's a place to put your animals. Like in the ancient time, you put your donkey there or put your pig there, and there's a little water well. And people have done interesting things where they've turned that first floor into like a spa, a little mini sauna that you have access to. And it's incredible, very creative. And it shows like the kind of range of the opportunities that you have access to in Sicily when you kind of dig into this what's available.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you're into the home for 35 grand, I can very much understand the feeling of being willing and open to just let loose on renovations. But Ciaran, the big thing, or a additional big thing, is the value proposition doesn't end there. Like holding costs are just near zero. Obviously you're in a town, you're not in a gated community, so you don't have HOA fees. I mean, these homes, Did these homes have air conditioning?
Some, but mostly no. You'd have to be putting them in, that'd be part
Yeah.
of your renovation, I think, for modernization for a lot of them.
Yeah, but they do outside of the peak heat of the intense summer heat when you might not want to be there anyway. Those old stone buildings stay really cool, but your holding costs are just just almost nothing. Your property taxes, your what you pay for your refuse collection, all of that is near zero.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's such an affordable thing to do beyond just, as you say, the cost of buying the property. And, you know, um, like I just find it a very compelling opportunity and a very interesting time to get into it, because you have had this decade now of people exploring the when you were homes things. And it is a time to go and look and say, well, look, there are communities that are starting to bounce back in a big way, because there's like a lot of inventory out there. As you mentioned at the top, Ronan, like a third of homes in Sicily are, unoccupied or only occupied part of the year by non-residents. Like, there is a lot of inventory there to be absorbed. So the pricing hasn't really changed on this yet, and you're still able to go in, you're able to buy these properties for far, far less than would cost to build them or replace them today, which is very cool.
Absolute fraction. And I do for in the towns that are the most successful ones, I do expect to see uplift, certainly in those Gangi homes, the more premium, the most premium ones in particular, those have seen some uplift. But you're not going to do this to get rich. And I guess, Ciaran, one of the key things we advise and help people to do here is to profile themselves. And by that, I mean just really just map out what are you looking for, who are you, and what are you in this for. So I guess, who's this for and who's it not for?
Yeah, exactly. Great question. Like, for me personally, I could see myself doing it. Like, I would use it as a part-time base. If I bought in one of these towns, I'd be there in spring and fall, which is what a lot of people do. You spend a month there, you kind of really just unplug from the world. You're in your village, you're going down to get your coffee every day, you're strolling back up home, you're kind of really, really relaxing into that lifestyle, and you're there kind of, if you put yourself in these hill towns, in kind of the springtime and fall time, you're kind of in the nice weather windows, because you're not in the winter when these places do get cold. You are in a lot of these hill towns are very high in mountains, they're exposed, and in summer, as you say, the heat can be very, very brutal. But I mean, as an opportunity for an escape, a base, I mean, I think that's where it would really, really appeal to a lot of people, because the inexpensive nature of it, the affordability of it is just very, very cool. Like, almost, I mean, like, I can't think of places anywhere else you get anything like this for the same level of, quality for that kind of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the cost of living now broadly across the board, for your grocery stores, for eating out, for utilities, everything in rural Mex or in rural Italy is now like it's less like, I mean, Ciaran, when we started in this world, you go back 1 or 2 decades, the big low cost of living places were places like Ecuador or Central America or South America. And sure, many of those countries still have areas that are relatively inexpensive, but more and more for a very high quality, low cost of living destination. I mean, you're looking at parts of rural Italy, Spain, and Portugal, and that's quite the flipperoo. The other thing to recognize as well is that you have amazing train and air access right across Europe. So this can also be a base. So, maybe that peak summer heat in Sicily is too much for you, but you can just hop on a plane and go to Northern Europe, go to coastal Portugal, do things like house swapping, whereby you can take what's going to be in demand for people from Northern Europe in those peak summer months and go and do a house swap with a family in Sweden or in coastal Portugal or here in Ireland.
That's a great point, Ron. It's a great point, because yeah, easy access to the rest of Europe, especially in summer when the flights ramp up from the cheap airlines like Ryanair. Like, you really have Europe on your doorstep. And I'll give people, I'm going to give an aside. I'm going to give people one piece of advice. If you're going to do this, I do think you need to go to Sicily and explore the towns yourselves. What I found talking to a lot of the brokers there and stuff, the best listings often don't make it online. Like in Mussomeli, especially, like, the best way to go is they do tours of like walking tours of 30 or 40 properties, and you can just go to the town and sign up for these, and they'll take you around. You can see a whole bunch of different stuff at once, and that's really the way to do it. Online listings, you'll find some online and on things like Ideally, but be there. That's the way to do this, you know.
Yeah,
And it'll be great fun.
100%. You know, absolutely, Ciaran. That mirrors my experience as well. Yeah, the best listings don't make the websites, and if they do, no one will answer your email. Just be there. Just, you know, enjoy the journey. Put yourself physically there. Block out time and put yourself there and choose your town and choose your property.
And one last tip before which is, if you get a free rental car upgrade at the airport, say no, okay? Book a Fiat Panda, book the smallest car that you that you can find, and stick to it. Don't let them give you a free SUV, which they often do, because nobody wants an SUV in Sicily. Because once you get up into these hill towns, you need a stout heart and a steady hand to make it through these tiny lanes. You know, no free car upgrades.
And if the car is already badly scraped, embrace it, because it's only going to get worse. Now, Ciaran, in the coming months and year or so, we're going to have a very interesting standoff emerge here, and that's between Sicily 30 euro homes and sub 30 euro homes, and Japan 30 and sub 30 euro homes. So I'm busy planning a full 4 to 6 weeks in Japan this winter. Going to primarily base myself in Okinawa, but travel across the country. And I'm just captivated about this idea of rural Japan living, rural coastal Japan living, and being able to buy just homes from under $50,000.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible as well. And I'll be kind of returning soon to Sicily as well, to kind of do the southern coast, Marsala, down around Agrigento, places like that. So I'm super excited about that. But we'll have to have a standoff run. To close today, Ronan, let me ask you the question. Would you do this? Is this a play for you? Is this your profile?
I would, absolutely. The summers the summers are too hot for me, and the winters are too bracing. So it's a place that's got probably 6 months of weather that's within my sweet spot, which is, you know, not bad at all. So absolutely, I would. Now, it wouldn't knock off. It would fall into a slot year-wise that competes with Atlantic Portugal. So Atlantic Portugal would beat Sicily for me because of the wild ocean, accessible golf, you know, but I would do it, you know, if I didn't have the budget for the real estate that I have in coastal Portugal and something had to be sacrificed, I absolutely would.
Great. And if you guys would like to learn more about this opportunity or buying in Italy, we have a buyer's guide that will give you kind of the lowdown on what you need to know about buying in Italy today, some of our favorite markets in the country, some of the rules around owning and buying property there. That's free for you to download. You find the description in the comments. You can grab it there. Ronan, next up on the channel, we're going to a place. I know it's one of your favorite places in the world, because when you had the choice, when you turned 50, you had the choice to spend your 50th anywhere in the world. You chose here, and having visited, I'd say I fully understand why.
Yeah, absolutely. This is Todos Santos. It is one of the most special places on earth. Just a charming Pueblo Magico, beautiful red sandstone town with amazing restaurants, that whole kind of Wild West and Hollywood vibe. But just outside the town, you just have these just incredible, long, expansive Pacific beaches, amazing food, amazing temperatures, because it stays really, really cool there. You know, it's typically 10 degrees cooler than the Sea of Cortez side of Cabo. And it is literally just one of my most favorite places on earth to be, to spend time. When I'm in Cabo, I live just an hour away from there, and I just can't wait to get to Todos Santos out at the weekends. And we're going to share all why in our upcoming video.
Yeah, so great stuff, guys. Stay tuned to the channel. That'll drop on Thursday. Link to the Italy Buyer's Guide in the description. Ronan, great speaking with you today.
Lovely to see you, Ciaran.